when Paul Keating's recession we had to have happened in 1992, the building industry was the first affected. We had to sell our house, all of our personal possessions. We had to close 2 businesses. And so what are we going to do? I said, Victor, you've designed so many products for your architectural clients. Why don't we just go someplace and look for products to design for us? We said we had to get away. We had to go to a rural area. We had to go someplace where we could afford to live. Victor's mother had her second stroke. She lost the feeling in her right hand. And we were there one weekend watching her trying to iron her husband's shirt. And finally, she just, while Victor was watching her, she just burst into tears and she said, I can't iron. She said, I can't iron. I can't get a cover to stay on my board. And Victor, being the loving son, said, well, you're just not looking, are you? He said, I'm sure there's a cover out there that will do the job. And she said, there isn't, I've looked. On the way home, Victor said to me, he said, if I can keep a multi-story building up, I can certainly keep an ironing board cover on my mother's board. And he said, if I design it, he said, will you sew the prototypes for me? I said, of course I will, not knowing that was the worst decision I ever made. And so there we were on our dining room table, the proverbial, how does every business start, but on the dining room table, and there we were with a pair of Singer electric scissors cutting out, 2 layers of fabric at a time. And my overlocker there and my sewing machine. We got those 20 made, put them in the mail. Then we had orders for another 30. And by the time we'd made 500 covers, I knew that this was a business. And I said, we want it made out here in rural Australia. We want it made by men and women who have a disability because we've had prior experience. We've hired people who have had a disability and their attitude to work is up here. And they've been sewing for us for 24 years. If you want an ironing board cover that you want to stay on your board, we are the only ironing board cover that anchors itself to your board so that you can not only have wrinkle-free ironing and covers that don't ride up, but you can fold your board up and down with ease. It's just simple. We're now edging up towards 500,000 in one-on-one customers around the world. Well, the thing is, when you make one good product, and when that product is better than what what people can buy in the shops, they want to know what else you can make. So the next product that we made was something that Victor designed for me, which was our log lugger. It's our second best-selling product, even today. And then the next product that we did was an apron. So each product we've developed to fulfill a need.
This is a fascinating story with Carol and Victor forced to become creative to begin a new business. It became a successful business, all based on an ironing board cover.
And if success is based on the number of items sold, 500,000 sold is success. The fact that it's sold around the world is another pointer that it's an outstanding business.
Many people want to have some kind of extra income for retirement. For some, it's by working on maybe fewer hours a week. Some become consultants and work the hours they want.
And some become entrepreneurs and start their own business. It doesn't always work, but there's a growing number attempting it.
So let's start with something from an earlier program where Owen Weeks shared the 2 things you must know if you want to set up a business.
My first piece of advice is don't risk your retirement savings. In other words, if you're going to start a little business, start small. Now, there's 2 critical things that everybody in business has to master. Only 2. One is you have to learn how to attract clients or business. And the second one, you must get paid. Now, if you don't master those 2 things, you won't be in business for very, very long. There's a lot of other things you've got to learn about regulations and barcodes on things and suppliers and all those other things. But if you haven't got a client, you're not going to stay in business. And if you don't get paid, you're not going to stay in business. They're the only two things that really, really matter. Now, what I like about the internet is you can run a little business from home. You can attract clients by having a good website, and you can get paid by using PayPal or any of the other payment systems. And in many cases, you get paid before you even deliver the things. We sell books on where to retire and other things, and we get paid before we even ship the book off. That's what you've got to try and master.
If people have really enjoyed their work and they still want to work in some capacity, to do a lot of thinking about that beforehand. And I'm not talking about, 2 years before you retire. I'm thinking 10 years out from retirement. You want to start thinking about what that part-time work looks like and where you might be working, what sort of skills you might need, because it might need a bit of repositioning. You might need to do some extra training. You might need to set up some new contacts. You might need some more experience. So thinking about that well in advance. One of the interesting things is that about a third of people that retire think they're going to work part-time before they retire fully. Not everyone does. And when we look at the individual level for planning, that's the amount of time they spend least on. For men and women, both men and women spend the least amount of time thinking about what that part-time work would look like, although about a third of people think it's going to materialise somehow.
Here are some statistics from Australian baby boomers. Okay, now it's Australian, but I think the results would probably be similar throughout the world. 61% of workers say they'll need to work in retirement. Okay, that's a majority, of course. But 53 of them say they simply work in retirement to keep busy. It's not about finances. That surprised me. But money came a close second, with 48% saying they'll keep working so they'll have enough money. Only 9% said that they couldn't afford to retire. There's a little group of statistics that say quite a lot. Number one, finances is not the main reason people won't retire. It's to keep busy. That fascinated me. The reality is people are living longer, and we need funds to survive for longer. The good news is that we are living longer, but we are living younger for longer. And that may help when you look at finances.
I think there are a heap of options for income in retirement, but I don't think they're all so easy. I think the imagination, you're limited by your imagination. So, for example, if you're a knitter, you can knit something and sell it on Etsy. If you're, if you're a writer, perhaps you can sell some articles. If you're a handyman, you can go and do handyman stuff. But sometimes it's easier said than done. You need to make it known that this is what you want to do, so put it out to your networks. But I think the options that are available are plenty, and probably, I would assume, focused on the services rather than products.
I dare say, the internet throws up a whole lot of possibilities. It doesn't appeal to everybody, of course, but there are people looking for work, part-time work, casual work, sometimes full-time work, all listed on the internet. There are community projects. You might have an artistic bent, want to be a painter or a photographer or whatever. There's lots and lots of things people can do. It comes back to the old saying, it's not what you know, but who you know. And it's the who you knows that will find you the jobs, as long as they know you're looking for it.
In some parts of the world, workers who reach retirement age and want to keep working full-time are protected under law. The boss is not allowed to fire you if you're able to do the job. And if that's what you want to do, it's worth checking if you have that protection.
It's trickier if you're negotiating to work part-time because it does bring change to your status. But if that's what you want to do, you'll need to be prepared to negotiate.
And it's worth doing early so you and your boss are well aware of what's going to happen.
People are worried that if they go to their boss and say, I want to work part-time and I'm putting together a plan to do that, they're worried that their boss will hear, I want to be made redundant, or I'm not interested in being here anymore. So I think you need to make sure that there's a good trusting relationship there first, but not necessarily just be committed to the one work environment either. You know, to think beyond their current work environment, entrepreneurial opportunities, working for other companies that do something similar, who value the expertise. So I think if they feel that that's not likely to eventuate in their current workplace, to think more broadly about where the other workplaces are, they could apply that skill set.
Negotiating with an employer about changing your work hours to transition, depend on your employer. I would think sometimes it's difficult in bigger organisations because they have certain structures and protocols and HR rules. Smaller places, it also might be difficult because of resources, but assume it's okay. I think you just position yourself as, here is this great opportunity for you, for me to reduce my work hours. And it's good for you as the employer because you don't have to pay me as much, yet you retain all of this corporate knowledge and memory within your organisation. I can help transition the newer, younger people and train them up as I reduce my hours. And I'm still functional and contributing and can do the work. So I think there is a fear as people get older in organisations that if they make any requests, that they might become a target. You know, it might alert the employer, oh, they actually are older, I better get rid of them. But I think sometimes just having the conversation, you might be surprised. And planning it too. Don't sort of go to an employer and say, from next month I'd like to work 4 days a week, thanks very much. It might take a few months to put into play.
More and more organisations are making that possible. Most organisations these days are run with a very, very finely tuned human resources sector where every dollar is accounted for. And to try and find somebody to replace an experienced person who's probably very good at their job is difficult. And that's the last thing they want to do, having to say, oh, look, we've got this bunch of people all turning 60 and they all want to start working less. How are we going to do it? It's not as easy as it sounds. So not all organisations will do it. The nature of some businesses and the way they work. I mean, if you're driving a Euclid truck for BHP out in the middle of nowhere and it's a 5-day-a-week job, you can't go to BHP and say, hey, mate, I'm only going to work 4 days now. Somehow they've got to get the iron ore out of the ground still.
I do think it's tough when, particularly if people have left work and then they've tried to get back into the workplace, that's a tough transition. And there's lots of evidence from National Seniors Australia saying that older Australians want to keep on working, but the difficulty is finding those opportunities. And that's where I think probably, you know, the entrepreneurial and working for yourself becomes an option, and maybe having a defined skill set that you're taking to connections or suppliers or a network that you've already established. So leveraging whatever strengths you have and whatever skill base you have that makes you unique in the workplace, I guess. But it's a tough transition. That's why I'm suggesting people think carefully about the timing.
I still believe you can find things over the internet if you go looking for it at the right places, but it's still more a case of finding the people who are in the know. There are people, for example, on Phillip Island who seem to know what's going on everywhere. I call them professional busybodies, but that's another story. It's a case of knowing, you know, who's got influence in the community, and there are people of influence. Down here, for example, the editor of the local newspaper, very, very well-connected lady. If you ever wanted to work out what's going on in Phillip Island, you go and ask her. Then obviously there's politicians and there's a whole lot of other people in community groups who, you know, have all sorts of connections. I mean, we've got a very strong historical society down here that has done an enormous job of plotting the history of Phillip Island and you know, the stories that are coming out of that are very, very interesting.
Where does a 65-plus-year-old find a job? I don't think going online to Seek or any of those resources is probably the first option. And like most jobs are found through networks and connections and letting it be known that you're looking for work. So I would be saying that someone who's older would have a lot of networks, a lot of connections, and you'd be using those. And yeah, really network. And networking's not a bad word, it's just catching up with someone you know for a coffee or approaching them and saying, you know, I'm interested in this kind of work, do you know of someone I can call? So that it takes a bit of courage for some people, not all people are able to do that. But I think you'd have more success doing that than going online through a job agency.
Use your network as much as possible. I mean, use any networks that you have, any established networks, and go back to them to see if there's any opportunities. There are other employment agencies that will specifically help older workers, like Dome, for example. Don't overlook Mature Experience, which is an Adelaide-based operation. That's a possibility. But, you know, I think that people thinking forward to how they're going to be and how they want to work when they're 60, 65 is important so that they maximise their choice rather than just doing what is available, doing what really gives them joy.
There's something that's obvious about using your networks when looking for a job. There'll be people who you know who can help you. They may be in your industry, they may be friends with contacts.
This is not to say that you don't use the internet because it may be helpful for you. The big thing is to think ahead. Working out what you want to do is an important step.
It's also important to allow time for upskilling if that's what you need to achieve your goal. All of this is about being prepared and creating options.
And if setting up your own business sounds appealing, then there are a few principles that are universally important. If you're going to set up a successful business, you need to understand your local tax laws or get help from someone who does.
First of all, you've got to understand the difference between a hobby and a business. Tax law allows you to make $20,000 a year out of a hobby and not pay tax on it, depending on how you do it. So a hobby is tax-free, a business, you start paying tax. Then you've got to understand how GST works and Australian business numbers, and it goes on and on and on and on. And some people look at it and go, no, it's all too hard. There's no reason why you couldn't start a little hobby, though. And if the hobby takes off, then you probably can afford to go and pay an accountant to set you up properly and away you go. So look, as I said before, you should not risk your retirement savings and put all your money into something thinking, oh, I know how this is going to work, because the law could change, the economy could change. Businesses all go through cycles.
Yeah, the difficulties with turning a hobby into an income is that the hobbyist might put more value on what they're creating or doing than the person that might be the customer. And, knitting might be an example. The time involved, the cost of the wool or the yarn, the creativity, to put a price on that can be quite difficult to make a profit. So I think sometimes hobbies are great fun, but they're maybe not easy to commercialise.
There's quite a difference between a hobby and work. I mean, what you do for a hobby is something you do for pleasure. Work tends to be very well structured and you do it for pay. Now, some people want to turn their hobby into work. One of the questions you need to ask is, do you want to take something you really enjoy and turn it into something that is going to be demanding? It's a good question. Now some do it, they pull it off well. I mean, Alan Funk is a good example, a guy who retired at the age of 60 and turned his hobby, banjo making, into a business. For him, that worked. But it won't work for everyone. I mean, do you really want to take your hobby and have the problem of trying to sell whatever it is, the concept, whatever, having the business associates you have to work with, or the businesses you have to work with, having to work with the customers and so on? They're questions that need to be asked. It will work for some, it won't work for others, but it's a question worth asking.
I think the keys to starting a small business doing your research, so what is it you want to be in business for, doing something you like and enjoy, because I think it's very common to underestimate the time and effort that needs to be put in to make it successful. Most small businesses fail within the first 2 years, so it does require consistency, and it's much easier to be consistent and determined if it's something you really enjoy doing and believe in.
If you think you've got a good idea, try it out. It is literally suck it and see. So many people have thought something was a brilliant idea, which didn't come off, because it's, you know, there are market influences out there that you're just not aware of at the time. I say go for it. I say skill up or upskill. Make sure that you start out slowly and you learn from your customers. One advice I always tell to people is don't ever let anybody who is not paying for your product tell you what to do. If they're not using it and they're not prepared to open their wallet to pay for it, cross them off your list. They're tire kickers. But listen to the people who have a need for your product and who are prepared to open their wallet and buy from you, or are prepared to come and have a look at what you have to offer and listen to what they have to say. Ask questions. I always say talk to the public. You know, go to an event, take something that you want to sell and go to an event and try not to sell it. Just show it to people and say, what do you think? But I always encourage people, if you want to go into business, just know it's hard, but go for it. Be choosy about who you listen to. Your friends and your family are not your best advisors. Don't listen to people who have not succeeded. Surround yourself with people who are more experienced than you, that you can learn from. And always listen to people who have been successful.
So how will you measure success in your venture? Let's say you begin something to create new income, or you go work somewhere. How will you measure success? Will it be about the dollars? Now, some will do it because of the dollars, and that's good. You have to have the dollars in that case. But there has to be more than dollars. I mean, getting a stack of coins on your kitchen table is not really much of achievement when you think about it. Is there joy in what you're doing? Is there satisfaction in what you're doing? Is there the sense that you are achieving something in what you're doing? I'm not trying to discount the financial advantages that it brings or the finances, but I'm just asking, are there deeper things involved in this, or is it simply about money? Now, for some it will be simply about money. That's fine, but can you turn it into something more than that for more life satisfaction?
Their definition of success is not to do about money. It was more about they had a burning desire to do something and they've done it. And now it sort of brings in some extra income. It means they can travel, they get tax deductions for running their car, they do all sorts of interesting things. But if you ask them what are the key successes, they would probably say something like, oh, I'm now selling my ironing board covers to the Americans or something like that. They wouldn't put it in monetary terms. They wouldn't say I'm making $1 million or anything like that.
I think the risks of starting a small business is comes around with not having any focus about, you know, what's the outcome you want, but putting in too much time, too much money, not being clear on what it is that would be success for you, and then getting frustrated and walking away from it, possibly too early. Not having a business plan is also a mistake a lot of people make. And a business plan can just be a one-page document. It doesn't have to be like War and Peace.
There is a clear list of important things to remember if you plan to start a business.
The first is focus and clarity, knowing what you're going to do and how you're going to do it.
And the second is being careful not to put too much time or money into an endeavour. In other words, know when enough is enough. Perhaps you need to decide before starting what is enough.
And that needs to be balanced with the possibility of walking away from it too soon. Balancing that with not putting too much time or money into it will take wisdom.
And then there's understanding what would be success to you. How would you measure success, including financially, but beyond that?
Finally, you'll need a business plan that includes research, purpose, strategy, marketing, and so on. This is not something you do on a whim.
It tends to be service-oriented, so people earning extra income once they've stopped work. So things like Airbnbs, they'll do that, or services like bookkeeping, or so skills they might have had when they were working, they'll continue with them. So bookkeeping, accounting, finance-related admin, but gardening, cooking, dog walking, dog minding, babysitting for money. So one of our clients, she worked in a medical centre as a receptionist, you know, quite busy and active, and she's retired recently, and she's now a celebrant. So she started training as a celebrant while she was working, and now she's building that business. And she doesn't make enough income to live on entirely, but the benefit of that is it is an income. It can be something she can turn off and on. She can do it that fits her own time frame, and she enjoys doing it. So that's one. Another example is someone that worked in accounts in a bigger organisation who's transitioned to retirement and does bookkeeping 1 day a week for small businesses as a consultant, so a contractor. Another example was a client who was a successful senior manager in a global company. He had something like 12,000 reports. You know, it was quite a senior role, and retired, and he's consultant now. So in that same industry, possibly to the same company, I think, but not employed. So he's self-employed as a consultant. And another client was an engineer, and he loved just doing handyman work around the house, building. So he does a lot of handyman work and gets paid for that. So there's options. If you want to keep on working, just keep on working, if you can. You don't have to stop. There's no, you know, there's generally no legal age at which you must retire. Some occupations have that, but no, keep on working.
There's a whole range of ways you can keep on working in some form in retirement, if that's what you want to do. A lot of them involves using the skills and training you already have, or you can train before retirement to take your new skills into retirement.
We hope you found this episode helpful as you look forward to your retirement and have seen the creative ways you could build some income.
And we hope you can join us for the next episode, which is about handling regret.
We don't think you'll regret it. Did I say that out aloud?
Yes, you did.